Hey guys, so today's video I'm gonna show you how to assembly amigurumi parts together. So there are gonna be two methods that I'm gonna show you. The first method is to sew on 3D details like these. So this method you can use to sew basically every single part of an amigurumi together. For example, head to body, arms, legs, ears, horns, tail, etc. And the second method I'm gonna show you is how to sew on the 2D like flat details like these hearts and sew on the body right here. So if you want to know how to do two methods, please keep on watching. Okay, so first is the first method. I'm gonna sew on this muzzle onto the giraffe. And first I'm gonna stuff the muzzle, and then I will place the muzzle onto the position that I want. Okay, so basically after stuffing you use a lot of pins to pin down the details that you are going to sew. As you can see here, I use tons of pins to pin this muzzle down, and what I use are these round bold ended pins that come in a wheel like this, and you can find these pretty much every craft stores at your local neighborhood. If you cannot find these at crochet sections, try to find these at the sewing section because people use these in sewing a lot. You can use this, or another thing that I also like to use are these called T-pins. This is by the brand Nipro. So basically they look exactly like picture right here. They are pins, but they have this T shape. I like to use these for large amigurumis because sometimes for gigantic amigurumis these small pins are really small to place the details down, because as you can see these T-pins are a lot bigger than these round ball pins right here, and when the details are too big and they are heavy, the small pins cannot place the details down firmly and it will move around. Okay, so let's just start assembly this muzzle on. So what I'm gonna use this yarn needle right here, and this is a big yarn with a big eye, so that you can thread your yarn through the needle perfectly. You can find these needles at crochet section. Okay, so I'm gonna start assembly this muzzle on for you guys to see. So for this method, basically you are going to go through stitch by stitch. So down the needle, pick up a stitch, go up, and then go through the not the first stitch, but the coming stitch right above. Let me take out the pin. So go through that stitch. And pull the yarn tight. Go down to the same stitch that you just go up. Pick up the next stitch on the surface. Go up, and thread through the stitch that plays right above. remember to pull the yarn tight so that it will look a lot neater and there will be no visible lines. Again, this method is used for 3D details. Like I said, like I mentioned earlier, you use this for pretty much every details except for any like flat 2D details that I'm gonna show you later on. And I use this for pretty much everything. Basically, you just keep on going stitch by stitch. It's a little bit hard to show you on the camera because I need to see where the stitches are, and my camera screen is a little bit too small. So if there are times when it's out the screen, please excuse me. If the yarn got pulled out, just thread it back again. Don't worry about it. So as I going, as I keep on going, I will pull out the pin and just keep doing that. So I will just go ahead and finish off sewing the muzzle, and I will show you how to finish off the yarn when you reach the last stitch, which is over here. So I reached the last stitch of this muzzle, but there's still this loop hanging, which is the last stitch that I did earlier to finish off the muzzle. So I'm gonna go through that slip stitch as well and sew it down. So now, in order to finish off this part, I'm gonna push the needle right to this far end, like the back of the head. Just push it, pull it tightly. If you see this, like the amigurumi is being pulled too tight and there's a dent on the surface, just use your needle to push it out a little bit. And you can see if the yarn is too short, it's basically just went right through the head. But if it is too long, you can tie knots or whatsoever and hide back onto the head. So I just finished sewing on the muzzle. Just fish it with your needle, like push the detail, shape it a little bit. So it looks like that. And now for the second method, I'm gonna show you how to sew on the 2D appliques onto the amigurumi. For this part, you are going to use a stitch that is called back stitch, which is very widely used in embroidery and sewing. I don't embroidery, but I learned this stitch that looks very neat for amigurumi, that I feel like, oh, I need to practice it and use it for my amigurumi. So basically you will do the same. You will place the applique onto the amigurumi. I bolt everything and place on the position that you want it to be, and use a lot of pins to pin this down. Embroider. How to measure yarn for assembly. For this second method, to assemble the 2D applique on, I like to wrap the yarn around the entire piece, like follow the shape, and this is like the length that will go around the entire shape, and you would want to triple this length, so that's 2 and that's 3. Triple this length so that later on we will have enough yarn, and remember to leave like a short amount of yarn out so that we can finish off easier, or we would not be lacking any yarn while we are sewing. For the 3D muzzle that I did earlier, instead of triple the length, I just double the length for all the 2D method. So basically I wrap the yarn around the muzzle 2 times, and that's the length that I need to sew on the muzzle right here. And also remember to leave a short tail so that we can finish off. And that is the perfect amount of yarn for you to sew on the 3D details as well as the 2D details. I figured that out. I figured these two out of my years crocheting amigurumi. No one mentioned this before, and when I first started out crocheting amigurumi and sew on the details, I always either cut the yarn too long or I cut the yarn too short. And I find these tips that are perfect for cutting the good, perfect amount of yarn for sewing. Okay, like earlier, use a lot of pins to pin everything down. You can go heavy on the pins because we need the details to place down firmly, not moving anywhere while we are sewing. That is very necessary. So I'm gonna show you how to do the back stitch. You can go and search for tutorials how to do back stitches on YouTube, so that you can watch it for slow-mo or like a little bit clearer if my explanation is not clear enough. So for the back stitch, we are going to go down and pick up a stitch on the surface first. Pull the yarn and go through the first stitch or the stitch right above. Okay, I'm gonna get this pinned out. For back stitches, instead of going forward, I'm going back to the stitch right. If you are right-handed, it will be the right stitch. Going forward, it will be the left stitch, but going back is the right stitch. Going into that stitch and going up to the forwarding stitch, which is this left stitch right here, not at the pin, but this right here. Pull yarn up and go to the stitch right above. I'm gonna put this pin out. Okay, again, going back to one stitch, which is the right stitch right here. Push it down to the below surface and push the needle too far to the left stitch, which is also our forwarding stitch, and pull the yarn. Go to the stitch right above, pull the yarn, go back to the reverse stitch, which is the right stitch right here, going down to the below surface, going up to the next stitch, the forwarding left stitch, pull the yarn, go through the stitch right above. So as you can see here, it creates a very neat looking stitches onto the surface. For example, these are finished details here. You can see how it creates very neat looking stitches, and it also creates sort of like a surface like this. If we did like the first method, it will have very visible stitches, cross stitches right here, like you can see here, here, and here. Like there's very visible stitches running vertically. But with this stitch, this back stitch for the 2D details, it is more like a running stitch on the surface. This is why I told you to triple the length of when we wrap around the entire shape, because we are going back and then we are going forward. So basically it will triple a stitch that you're going to do. Okay, so I reached the last stitch for this heart applet. So I'm gonna still go up to the very last right here. Do back stitches, still do back stitches. But you see here, this is where we initially start the back stitch, and we are going to do that again. We're going to push to that place again, and there's this weird looking loop right here. That was also the slip stitch that I did earlier. So I'm gonna go through that loop, and I'm not going to do a back stitch again, but I'm going to go right down and pull it to the place that I'm gonna tie my yarn later. So this is how the finished product looks like. So this is the finished product. You can see that the stitches look very neat. So these are the ending tails. They are a lot because all the details that I sewed on earlier also have the ending tails. And like I mentioned for the muzzle, if the tails are too long which I prefer tails are longer than the actual length that you use. You can tie knots. For example, I'm gonna tie knots for the tail and then hide back onto the amigurumi. I tend to tie knots 2 times so that it will be very firm, and use your needle to push it back. If there's no ending tails, that's fine, don't worry about it. But like I said, I prefer to have ending tails more because I can finish off by tying knots, and that way your amigurumi, the details will stay on more firmly. I feel like it will stay on more firmly. Okay, so I just finished showing you how to sew on the details together in 2 ways. The first way is for the 3D details. Pretty much everything for an amigurumi, you're gonna use the first method. The second method is to sew on the 2D details, like the hearts on the body right here. This is perfect if you wish to sew on spots or sew on small little details. This is a perfect stitch. And yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye guys.